Hello and welcome to episode number 52 of Chel Squared, the 1-year anniversary special. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and I'm so excited to get this show started. Over a year ago, I decided to try my hand at podcasting. I'm really proud to see how the show has evolved since that first episode, which in hindsight, maybe should have redone that one. But in any case, got an extremely special guest joining Chel Squared today. But before I introduce him, gotta plug the social media. That's always important. Please follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news about future guests, poll questions, and a whole lot more. If you want to follow my personal Twitter, it's at Chelney Andrew. Please rate the show if you enjoy listening. It means more to me than I can put into words. And as an incentive, I will give you a shout out on social media and on the podcast if you leave a rating, review, or follow the show. Thanks to Thomas Bryce for liking last week's episode and following the show on SoundCloud, and big thanks to the unnamed person who gave the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Whoever you are, I appreciate you. Every time you either like the show on SoundCloud, give it a rating on Apple Podcasts, follow it on Spotify, etc. It makes me feel great, and it helps the show out as well. Unless Chipotle or the local sushi place near me wants to sponsor me because I've given them more of my business over the years than I'm willing to admit, I don't make any money off the podcast. This is done out of love in my spare time. So when I see a new rating, a review, or a share, or whatever else, I get this big goofy smile that won't leave my face. So please do that if you haven't already. Also, Chel Squared is a part of National Podcast Network, a new network dedicated to NHL podcasts. Check the show out on there by going to nationalpodcast.network/Chel Squared. And though I am a SiriusXM employee, this podcast is not affiliated in any way with the company. The opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone, and do not necessarily reflect the views of SiriusXM. If you're angry at my takes, direct them to me and me alone, please and thank you. Now, congrats to the St. Louis Blues for winning their first ever Stanley Cup. I'm sure Gloria is still being blasted in that city as we speak, and congrats to the Toronto Raptors for beating the Warriors last night and winning their first ever championship. What a couple of days it's been for long-suffering fans of those teams. This being the 1-year anniversary special episode of Chel Squared. Before we get any further here, I would like to introduce my special guest, 2012 Stanley Cup champion with the LA Kings, also played for the Hurricanes and the Flames, played his final pro season in Europe with the Belfast Giants, Princeton grad, Manchester Monarchs veteran, and gigantic human being. I mean, I'm around like 5'10", 5'11", I would say on a good day. When I met him 2 years ago, it felt like I was 3 feet tall. It's an honor to introduce Kevin Westgarth to the show. Kevin, how are you?
Doing great today, and thanks for having me, Andrew.
Absolutely, Kevin. So when I entered
at the end, do you go by Chel professionally here on the podcast?
You can call me whatever you want. I mean, when I entered at the NHL, Bob Bender, who was my boss, I mean, he gave me so many different nicknames that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call me, honestly. When I interned at the NHL 2 summers ago, I remember you walking by because we worked on the same floor at the time, and thinking, holy insert name, insert word here. That's Kevin Westgarth. This was my first internship. So at the time, so I was very hesitant to reach out at first, but I eventually did, and I loved the conversation that we had over lunch at the time. Really good points just about hockey in general. And I remember I asked you for a picture afterwards, but again, super awkward, like, because I didn't want to intrude or anything. But again, I'm like 5'10", but I look like I'm tiny standing next to you in that picture. It's still somewhere on my Instagram. I might dig it out and post it on Twitter after this episode goes up. But you were out of pro hockey for a couple of years at that point, and you still look like you could crush just about anybody just by looking at them. You might have been out of hockey at that point, but hockey was definitely not out of you. Is maintaining a strict workout regimen something that you still do because you're so used to it, or do you do it just to stay healthy?
It's probably taken a little bit of a dip since retiring from hockey, but yeah, I appreciate it. It's definitely important to stay healthy. I have two little boys now, 3 and 18 months, so it's certainly that keeps me busy, but sometimes makes it harder to be as healthy as I would like to be. But something that we should all take pride in is maintaining our physical fitness, and certainly something I think that's important in the long run. Now that I'm sitting at a desk and not skating around and having guys take swings at my head. So
Before we get into the cup talk here, let's rewind the clock a little bit. You were an undrafted player out of Princeton. You played there for 4 years, figured out early on that you do well in a grinded out bottom six type role. And in March of 2007, you got signed by the LA Kings on a 2-year deal. Take me through that process. Were you surprised by that call at all?
It was certainly one of the most incredible times of my life. It was, there was a bit of writing on the wall. I was kind of lucky enough to go to a couple rookie camps in the years before my senior year at Princeton. Obviously important to kind of get your name out there, be seen. Went to New York and Philadelphia. So kind of had understood that there was a bit of interest from the Kings. And, certainly playing would have never changed a thing about my developmental career. Going to college was a perfect avenue for myself. 4 years I'll never forget. Probably most importantly, met my wife there, but also very importantly was able to just play the game and work on all the skills. I was pretty sure by that time that certainly fighting and kind of protecting my teammates was what was going to get my foot in the door. But the landscape was such that you had to be able to play. So I was able to go there, work on my game, have 4 incredible years with some, absolutely incredible teammates and, people at the school. And we ended up actually winning a round of the playoffs. We won more games every year that I was there, which was not the hardest thing to do, given that the year before I got there, the team had won 3 games. So, but at the end of the day, my senior year, we had a home playoff series that we beat Brown, and then we're in Dartmouth round 2. Ended up losing, pretty devastating, and kind of getting to the locker room and just looking around the room and just realizing that 4 years, went by in a flash, and that you're never going to be able to play with these guys again that you'd lived and eaten with and, partied with and just lived and died with on and off the ice. So it was certainly a pretty, sad moment. And then, 20 minutes later, my advisor called my brother, who was actually on the team, and we actually were able to graduate the same year. We went up to see George Bezos, fantastic advisor and agent. And he kind of showed us a printout of all right, you both have some interest in you, and here's what you're probably looking at. My brother, here's what you're probably looking at, Kevin. And it was minimum NHL salary, maximum signing bonus. I'm kind of just shaking my head. It's obviously this isn't going to happen, but thanks for showing me this. Really nice to see and kind of cool to think about. And not half an hour later, we were on the bus to dinner, and he called and said the Kings were willing to sign me at exactly what we talked about. AHL or 2-way deal, low NHL or minimum NHL minimum. So, they're not hesitant to call you up. And it was one of the biggest lows of, my certainly hockey career, maybe life, to one of the biggest highs. And my favorite part was being able to kind of immediately share that with, my teammates, my coaches, the guys that had, that were such an integral part and such a major part of me even having that opportunity. So it was, a pretty cool moment to be able to, sign that deal and share it with them.
This was 12 years ago, and I like that you still remember, how many wins you had, who you play in the playoffs. I think that's super cool to me anyway. I mean, I could be in the minority here, but these are little details that you remember. What were some of the biggest moments that you remember from your time at college? You played beside your brother for, I think it was 3 out of the 4 years, if I'm not mistaken, at Princeton. Exactly. And you met your wife and stuff like that. But besides those obviously 2 big things, what were some of the coolest or the moments that you remember the most from your time at Princeton?
From a hockey standpoint, there was kind of a cool mirroring or echo that so the first year that I was part of the team, my freshman year, we went out to Minnesota to play the two-time defending national champion Minnesota Golden Gophers in their kind of Christmas tournament, and ended up losing that game 9-0. I
Oh
believe
boy.
that we used to have a board with like our kind of highline stats, and the scoring opportunities were 30-1. So strangely enough, I think our goalie actually had a great game, even though he gave up 9 goals. Fast forward 2 or 3, I think it was 2 years later, we were then playing the Denver Pioneers in their Christmas tournament, two-time defending national champions, and went in and beat them on their home ice. And it was just such a testament to certainly my class and like the guys that were coming on board, and just this college can be very cyclical and ebb and flow with I mean, your roster is constructed. There's no trades. There's no free agent signings per se. So it was something to grow together, and just to see that, a couple of years later, to see what we've been able to do together really stuck with me. And it was, just a great feeling. We went on to lose to Boston College in the final of that one, unfortunately. But overall, it was a great feeling to know that we've been making progress and that everybody on the team had a big hand in it.
And then after your final loss in college, you got signed by the LA Kings. You played a couple of years in Manchester, and then you got the call up by the Kings in the 08-09 season. You played your first 9 career NHL games in that season. What was that like for you? What was some of the advice that you got before stepping on NHL ice for the first time?
Oh man, it was. I think the most important thing is just to remember it's another hockey game. Obviously, you're kind of buzzing and pretty amped up. And I had kind of a strange. Basically, my call up was born of Wayne Simmons had gotten cheap shotted. And, the coach Terry Murray at the time kind of didn't like the team's response, kind of thing, and so gave the call. I called in the right-hander, and I got called up. And the first game that I was there for was a game against the Red Wings in LA, and was not super confident of getting the call that game, which I did not. But it was great to be there, obviously, seeing the level that the NHL team is at practicing, and kind of just the professionalism that just is pervasive through the organization at that level is incredible. So it was great to just start getting my feet wet. We went on a bit of a road trip, went to Dallas. I took warm-ups and then didn't play. So they really eased me into it. But by the time we got to Minnesota, the next game, I built it up on the runway and was pretty amped up to play, obviously. And at that time, Derek Bogard was there, and it was certainly something that was on my mind, that if things called for it, I might have to drop the gloves against probably the toughest guy in the league, and was kind of trying to prepare for that. But obviously wanted to show that I could play and keep up and be a contributing part otherwise as well. So heading into that game, we ended up going up pretty early, and as time's ticking on, my line mate was Rightus Evenons, and another tough as nails hockey player, as you well know. And so we were on the same line. I kind of turned to Rightus at one point. I was like, man, we're up. I don't want to lose momentum, but I also want to show that I'm willing to go if I need to. It's they're kind of playing a little on the edge. So. And he's like, nah, don't fight him. Then next thing I know, Rightus is over the boards in a fight with Boogie. So it was a good lesson to remember that, acknowledging that Rightus was in the right, and I essentially was in competition for a job. It was really one of those learning moments where it was like, oh, right, yeah, we're a team, but there's really important careers and family life that goes along with all this. So even though you're doing everything for each other, it's like you kind of do have to make sure you're doing best for yourself as well. And it was pretty amazing to be up. I think my brother gave me the best both advice going into the game, kind of remembering it's just another hockey game, and once the puck drops, you're into it, and you're right back to everything you'd practice your whole life for. And then after the game, I just got I think it was basically a one-line text from him. He's like, "You played in the NHL, like nobody can ever take that away from you." And it was just, we're not brothers who are overly emotional and communicative. So it was like the most kind of succinct way. And I really felt, had a lot of the feels after reading that one. It was pretty cool.
That's
and actually,
awesome.
Side note, perhaps as importantly, there was another initiation or kind of rookie coming into his new job that day, which was the incoming President Barack Obama got sworn in on the same day. So I think of equal importance, Kevin Westgarth's first NHL game and Barack Obama getting sworn in as president. I might be a little biased, but for me, they're equally as important.
Well, we just watched the Blues win their first Stanley Cup a couple of days ago. In the 2011-12 season with the Kings, you played 25 regular season games. You didn't get to play in the playoffs because you broke your hand, but the team got your name on the cup anyway. When you lifted the Stanley Cup, what was going through your head? How did it feel?
Oh, it was incredible. And I guess even before diving into that, like I do have to give credit to the Kings organization, like everybody from Luke to Dean at the time and Daryl Sutter. And I mean, obviously all the boys were, like I'd been with the team for the organization, at least for 6 or 7 years at that point. So it was pretty cool to be part, even if I wasn't with the big club the entire time. I came up playing with a half dozen of the guys that became premier players. A number of them still there between Trevor Lewis, Alec Martinez, Jonathan Quick. I lived with Quickie in Manchester.
Not a fan of Alec Martinez, by the way. I'm just.
What's that?
I'm not a huge fan of Alec Martinez, so I'm sorry. Sorry,
Marty.
Sorry to Alec.
I'm
still holding my grudges.
Oh, I think I understand why. You can't argue the Jazz hands though. That was legendary. But it was incredible for them to kind of acknowledge some of the role players that way, that even though they weren't scoring the goals in the games, they were part of the journey that got us there, and really did kind of live by the words of the process that they were taking to get there. So it was an amazing time, and certainly lifting that Stanley Cup over your head, it's such a surreal moment. And I think that is, there's not been a word more perfectly aligned with defining a moment. And I think I've heard it 100 times already with the guys on the Blues, and rightfully so. You've imagined this, you've dreamt about this your entire life when you're 5 years old playing ball hockey in your driveway or on the street. Like, you're always scoring the Game 7 overtime goal to win it. And then lifting the Stanley Cup over your head. So it's one of those things that you've dreamt about for so long, and it actually happened to the fortunate few. You're kind of like, wait a minute, am I still dreaming? And you just are skating around with that 35-pound chalice above your head, and it's there's not many feelings like it.
So take me through that season and the summer with the Cup. When it was your turn, how did you spend the day with the Stanley Cup?
Oh man, that was brought the Stanley Cup back to the thriving metropolis of Amherstburg, Ontario. I'm sure yourself and your listeners have heard of it. No, but my hometown where I grew up, probably a town of about 8,000 people in the actual town. And so it was, brought it back to my small town, brought it to the community hockey rink, and I think 3,000 people showed up kind of just to get a picture. And I was very aware that they were not there for me and that they were there for Lord Stanley's Cup for sure. But obviously pretty cool to share that with, saw people I had seen in years, and obviously closer friends and family were able to get to basically to my backyard for a barbecue. So it was all pretty low key. But, sharing that with, similar to, the Princeton guys in the locker room that I was able to share, getting an opportunity to hopefully one day play in the NHL by signing a contract, bring it back to, my parents' house and sitting on the backyard with my buddies that I've known for 20 years and had lived with and grown up with. It was really special. I think I didn't need to do a shoulder workout for for a week or two, since basically the rule is that the cup winner is supposed to be the only one that is actually holding a cup for people to drink out of it. And so between holding a cup for drinking some pops out of the beer and raising it above my head for family and friend photos, it was quite a day. And when that thing left, there's obviously sadness that the day is over, and but it's basically the longest day of your life. It's still too short, and it was so fantastic. I was lucky enough to get it there pretty early in the morning and basically spend some quiet time with my wife and my brother and my parents, and those are the people that really made it all happen, and can never thank them enough. But hopefully a nice breakfast with Stanley was a little bit of reward for them as well.
So throughout that season and the playoffs, what were some of the best moments that kind of stick out to you, that you've either shared with the cup later on, or with teammates, or maybe both? What are some of the moments that are really kind of still fresh in your mind?
For the run, I think the most kind of the coolest memory I have was the fact that we went in, we were the 8th seed, so kind of last team in, and we'd had a bit of a challenge that year, and Terry Murray had gotten fired halfway through the season, and we obviously took ownership of that, and felt that obviously that's our performance that was doing that. And John Stevens took over for a couple of games in the interim, and Daryl Sutter ended up getting hired. So it was something of a tumultuous year, but we had started the season in Europe, and it was kind of a crazy trip. We had a sleep doctor come up with this stepwise way of adjusting that I don't think worked for anybody. You got guys passed out on the bus on the way to games, and waking up at 3 a.m. basically starving for dinner. And it was a battle that we had all gone through together. So we were kind of, by the time we got to the playoffs, we had certainly been confronted with some challenges and adversity, and had gotten through it together. And everything just started hitting on all cylinders. So when we went into Vancouver, the President's Trophy winning Vancouver Canucks, came back, after 2 games, we're coming home with 2 wins. It wasn't just me, but nobody wanted to actually say that Jesus, I think we're going to win the Stanley Cup. 2 games into the playoffs, pretty rarely can you have that feeling. But everything was just working so well. Even practicing at that time, guys weren't missing passes. Everybody was running on all cylinders and just to perfection. And obviously Jonathan Quick was absolutely lights out, which was incredible. He ended up having back surgery after the season. I remember he couldn't sit on the plane seats. He'd have to lie on the ground with his legs on the seats. But for whatever reason, when he got in net, that was where he felt, that was basically the only place he felt comfortable. And he was his normal Gumby self. And he obviously was just maybe the reason, but a major reason of why we were able to win that cup. And then obviously the celebrations are, certainly probably too many stories to tell on and off record, but I distinctly remember one one special, one funny moment. I think it was 3 or 4 days after we had won, and in LA it was fantastic. Our kind of staff had done a great job of setting things up. We threw out the one day, I think we threw out a first pitch at a Dodgers game, went to Jimmy Kimmel to be on his show. And by that time, though, it was I think some of the guys hadn't even slept in 72 hours. So they were ready for at least a break. And as we were heading back to kind of Manhattan, Hermosa Beach, where most of the guys lived, it was what do we want to do with the cup? And it was nobody spoke up. So take it to my house, and basically just ended up having there was probably 6 or 7 guys with their, better halves, their wives or girlfriends over. So it was but it was just low key, just chilling, having a couple beers. We ordered Domino's, and I remember at one point had a roof deck overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It wasn't too shabby to play in LA. But sitting up there with Jonathan Quick, the Stanley Cup in between us, basically it might be sacrilege, but we had just won. So like a Domino's pizza, like cheesy sticks box sitting in the cup, just because it was like, we'd been in Manchester, New Hampshire, I think 3 years before that, living together. So it was just this absolute wild ride that had gotten us there. And it was, a pretty special time to spend with it. I have to give props to Davis Drew Whiskey as well. We had brought the cup to a club in LA and spent some time there. And he kind of walked outside, I think made a phone call or something. And as he's walking back in, or as he was about to walk back in, he saw a guy that was kind of being held up by security and like wasn't allowed in because it was King's event, and turned and he kind of looked over and it was David Beckham.
Wow.
And so they knew who Davis was, and Davis was like, oh no, he's cool. He can go in. Because he'd been a big fan of the team. He'd been around, worked for our kind of parent organization, AEG, as well, with the Galaxy. And so Davis Drew Whiskey, one probably the only person on earth that can say that he got David Beckham into a bar.
So now the most important question is, when you ordered Domino's, did the delivery person see the Stanley Cup? Did you hide it? Did you let him see it? What was the moment where you opened the door and the delivery guy came with your food?
Yeah, I think he checked it out. He was, I think it was a little too much to believe. So he just kind of saw it. I unfortunately don't remember too well, to be honest.
Fair enough. Fair.
Yeah. I think it was kind of one of those things that he just probably shook his head and like, that can't be the Stanley Cup, and then walked away. It's kind of unbelievable to see in real life when you're not expecting it.
That's incredible. So this 11-12 run that you guys went on, you mentioned it, you were the last team to make it to the playoffs, and then as soon as you made it, it almost seemed like you were unstoppable. You lost, 4 total games in that run? You destroyed the Canucks, who were the best team at that time. Then you swept St. Louis. You came into Phoenix and you ruined the Coyotes, and then you ruined the Devils in 6 games also. What was there a specific moment? I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but was there a specific moment that kind of led to the ball rolling, in a sense of, hey, we went from a team that just barely made it to a team that, hey, we could do this? Was there a specific moment, or was it just kind of an overall feeling?
I think there was a build, and actually going back to, I mean, if I ever had the opportunity to build an NHL franchise, the way that the LA Kings, by having Terry Murray with a younger core and just build in kind of systems play and like fantastic like responsibility, like really building essentially the way you should play hockey, and then transitioning that into Daryl Sutter, who was absolutely going to get the best out of everybody. Like, I couldn't have pictured a better way to actually kind of craft a team. I mean, when you look at, I think we had known that we were underachieving most of the year, like all year. But there were a few pieces, certainly getting Jeff Carter in a trade. But like, I mean, beyond that, you had Andrei Kopitar, Drew Doughty, who in my estimation is probably the best hockey player on earth still. Andrei Kopitar, Mike Richards, Jared Stoll, the leaders in the Matt Green, Rob Scuderi, like the leaders in the room was everyone almost. Like the number of guys who were Dustin Brown, speaking of which, the captain, like Brownie was a leader by example, and we, like, everybody took a little ownership, but we had such a great veteran crew that was able to, stemming from Daryl and Dean Lombardi, like, get the best out of everybody. And I think it just took a little time for us to get there. But as you said, like, it was all the pieces kind of lining up at once. There's always a bit of an adjustment period. I think when Daryl came in, we were out of the playoffs and we were able to, work our way back in, but stumbled a bit down to the finish line. But by that time, it was kind of like, all right, now this is it. Now this is where we can leave our mark. And that was exactly what everybody was on the same page, pulling in the same direction. I mean, I think of between Trevor Lewis and Brad Richardson, Kyle Clifford, my boy Cliffy, like the role players we had were phenomenal hockey players, and everybody knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing and running full tilt at that point.
So the vast majority of us, unfortunately, are not Stanley Cup champions. You played 6 playoff games with LA in the previous season in 2010, 2011. Us fans know the game is different in the postseason than, let's say, in January 23rd or whatever, But from a player's perspective, what do you do different, if anything, to kind of prepare yourself for those high intensity games? And what's something that fans should be aware of when it comes to crunch time that maybe a lot of us just aren't or don't notice it as much as we should?
I mean, I think, we have a pretty long season, and I think, we're very lucky to be doing what we're doing. We're fortunate as hell to be playing hockey for money. Anybody that gets to do that is in a very, very small minority. But through the year, you do lay it on the line night in, night out and kind of give it your all. But we saw with the Blues, you do you just ramp that up even to kind of that classic 110% level. This is all, unfortunately, a little bit hockey cliche answer, but it is just that focus, and the teams that are successful end up having everybody pulling in the same direction with that singular focus on performing their role to the best of their abilities. And when that starts happening, which is exactly what happened with us, which is exactly what happened with the St. Louis Blues, I dare say, though they lost in the conference finals, my old buddies in Carolina, we got to see a lot of that this year. Props to Justin Williams. Oh my goodness, how did I forget about Willie, Mr. Game 7 himself? We didn't have a Game 7 though, so in that playoff run, but Justin
you didn't
Williams,
need to. You were destroying everybody. You didn't need
exactly.
a Game 7.
We went up 3-0 in every series. It was absolutely incredible. But at the end of the day, it is just getting everybody on the same line. And as I said, the practices were something to behold. It was, to be a part of it and just be snapping, every pass is on a tape. It's just everybody is at their best, and those are the teams that end up having success. It really is a special feeling. And to be honest, my first playoff game was in San Jose. Great building. Like, you could feel the buzz 2.5 hours when we were 2.5 hours before the game when we were showing up. There was just some electricity in the crowd, and obviously by the time the game's getting going, everybody's ready to explode. So I would say that that's part of what feeds the play on the ice, is that electricity in the stands. And our fans, and particularly the ones that end up at playoff games, they're into it. And for my money, there's not a better product in professional sports than the NHL playoffs. It's the most energy, especially if you get to see it live. There's nothing like it.
You won the cup, and then come October, there's still no hockey because of the lockout. So you got a sort of extended holiday with the Stanley Cup. You were one of the bigger contributors from the player side in figuring out a solution to end this lockout. Besides, obviously, being temporarily out of a job, what led you to kind of grab the bull by its horns, in a way, and become one of the key voices in figuring out a solution for both sides?
Well, obviously, it's an important time. It's a time that nobody relishes in, but personally, I was interested in it, which was probably the major driver. And secondarily, it was something that was very important. Obviously, being a part of the NHL Players Association was something I'd been a rep, I think, for a couple of years. Even though I was so that was kind of one of the funny things. I think I'd been in the league for 2 or 3 years at that point. So not the youngest guy, but probably one of the fresher faces from a experience in the NHL standpoint, but just knew that I could contribute as well. So, and to his credit, Don Fear was very democratic. Basically, it was like anybody that wanted to come and join was free to. And I was the Kings rep at that time. It was just something that I thought was really important and wanted to be a part of, and kind of became one of the 5 or 6 kind of, I suppose, key players that got involved heavily. And, it was frustrating at times, but it was also just obviously very frustrating at times. But it was an education you couldn't pay for. It was an absolute, lesson in kind of how this gets done, and more importantly, the things that get discussed. I'd been interested in trying to understand what was going on, but obviously when you're throwing yourself head first, it really creates that understanding of not just the hockey side and kind of the day-to-day things that affect the players, but the business side as well, and understanding the ins and outs of that. So something I'm very proud to have done. We were able to get a kind of improve the pension for ourselves and future generations of players, kind of be second to none, which was one of my bailiwicks throughout the process. And obviously opportunity to work with the NHLPA leadership, but also the NHL leadership and owners, was, taking up an opportunity that was there. And, probably segging to your next question, something that obviously paid off in the end for myself.
After the lockout was lifted, it was over. You were traded to Carolina, and then the year after that, you were traded to Calgary, and then after the 2014 season ended, which is where my feud with Alec Martinez stems from. You went to Edmonton Oilers camp. You didn't make the team, so in what was your final pro season, you decided to go to Europe and play for the Belfast Giants. What did you see in the road in front of you that made you kind of decide to head overseas? How is the fan support over there?
Oh, it was incredible. I had known a couple guys that had gone over. A friend of mine actually did his thesis in part on the Belfast Giant team. He had Irish ancestry, and at Princeton you do a thesis for your senior independent study. So I was kind of aware of the team and the league, and Theron Fleury had gone over there years before. My hope was they were not expecting another Theron Fleury, who I think averaged 3 points a game or something. And but it was thrilling. I mean, the first game I showed up, I think there was 7,500, 8,000 people in the stands, and it was a pretty electric building, and just a great opportunity to both continue to play hockey, but obviously get a pretty cool experience as well. I also have Irish history, and Belfast is in the north. It was pretty close, and certainly the town and city itself was incredible. The people are incredible. In true British and Irish fashion, acknowledging the troubles that had plagued Belfast in the past. They basically told us, like, oh no, we love everybody. We just hate each other, which was perfect. Like, kind of, people couldn't have been more welcoming and friendly. And to be honest, if I could recommend, if anybody's heading overseas, definitely make a stop at Belfast. It's a fantastic place.
And then after that season in 2015, you were just 31 at the time, you decided to call it a career. How hard was it for you to say, I think it might be time, even though you weren't at, I guess, quote unquote, regular retirement age? What was the tipping point for you?
Yeah, I think certainly some opportunities. I'd actually been in discussions to basically most likely go back to an AHL team following that Belfast year. But as push kind of came to shove, it was one of those things. There was probably a little cleaner being an enforcer at that time, and knowing that, we have lots of time to live, and we have basically playing hockey has its risks for injury always, and certainly being an enforcer might amplify that a little bit. So it was one of those situations where I finally made the decision that it was time to hang him up, and as I was joking earlier, maybe go use my brain for something other than stopping fists, I suppose. But it was, it was an interesting time. The 10 years that I played pro, it was, I think when I came on, it was basically like, be careful with your hands, and like try not to get a concussion, but like make sure you don't break your orbital, because then you're really out. But the awareness of head injuries and everything that progressed from there, it just became the awareness and understanding of which I at no point think we're at the end of figuring out. There was just a pretty clear equation for what my future was going to hold, and it was exciting for me to kind of pursue the next chapter of my life and find that new passion that was going to drive me, like I had for the previous 25 years of playing hockey.
This was going to be a question that I was going to ask a little bit later on, but I'm glad you brought this up. So as a former enforcer and tough guy on the ice, is there, in your personal opinion, is there enough safety precautions, do you think, to minimize brain injuries in the NHL, or do you feel as if there could be more done? And if you do, what are some of the measures you think could be taken?
I think kind of overall from addressing head injuries, the NHL has actually been probably the most progressive of our major sports, and like hockey itself, from Hockey Canada and USA Hockey, and trying to curb injury in that way. So it is. Our work is never done in addressing player safety, and actually fellow CBA negotiator and Prince and Tiger himself, George Peros, who now runs the NHL player safety, certainly along with the commissioner and deputy commissioner Bill Daly. It's such a focus here, and that's actually been one of the cool things to be here and be able to contribute my little bit, but to see what they do kind of on that front. We're always looking for ways to make players safer in kind of all facets of the game. So it is something I think we're addressing. Inevitably, nobody's found the secret sauce, and I don't think there is an ability to make a incredibly fast contact sport perfectly safe. But that doesn't mean we'll ever stop trying.
And what would you say to those people that would say, oh, George Paris was an enforcer, he's a tough guy, and now he runs player safety. Oh, they should get somebody else to do it who played the game, who didn't hurt people. What do you say to those people that think that way?
I understand the knee-jerk reaction, but kind of when you actually think more deeply about it, the fact that George, never got suspended in his career, was probably one of the most respected and respectful players on the ice. And then third, spent his career protecting his teammates, really kind of actually validates his selection as the head of that department. Beyond that, George is just such a thoughtful, smart person, and just being able to see what he's already been able to do with kind of his time in that chair has been really encouraging. He's really trying to get the players involved more, made a tour to every single one of the teams to talk about points of emphasis that we're looking at this year, make sure they understand, ways to basically stay out of his spotlight, but also ways to both protect themselves and just be aware on the ice. So there's so many things that he's brought to the table that I think obviously is lost in that kind of very surface level reducctive view of him taking on the position.
I would nominate him for his mustache, to be honest with you. If for nothing else, I feel like his mustache deserves a spot. If everything else equals zero.
Exactly. You think about that mustache, maybe it'll prevent you from hitting that guy from behind or taking a run at somebody's head. So that's a good point. And that being said, I mean, he's got Ray Whitney and Stefan Quintal and other guys that have his ear to help make these decisions. And we really do have a pretty great cross section of the guys that played the game to make these decisions. And I don't envy that position. It's if it's your team, it's the worst call ever. It's the other team. It should have been more games. And the level of detail that group addresses and considers is astounding. And if you're not watching basically 100 clips a night, there's no way to actually keep up with it. So my heart goes out to him, and I guess I'll all your listeners and yourself that he is doing a great job and will continue to do so.
So for you personally, you didn't stay out of hockey long, though. You retired in 2015, and then in January 2016, you got a job in the NHL office in New York City. You became VP of Business Development and International Affairs. What exactly does that mean, and what do you do day to day?
Well, very, I guess, harkening back to obviously getting to meet both PA leadership and the NHL leadership. I had stayed in touch with all of those people, from Don Fear and Steve Fear and other Matt Schneider and the folks at the PA and more Deputy Commissioner Daly. So it kind of stayed in touch, and as I saw the potential writing on the wall, I was still a trustee on our pension on the PA side. And kind of would speak to Bill Daly as I was in town for those, and really just kind of asked what would be available and spoke with the PA guys and kind of was transparent about everything. It's like I'm exploring all my options. I explored, other gigs in New York, inevitably in the finance and all those fun fields, but obviously, if I was able to stay in hockey, that was plan 1A. And eventually, as we continued the conversation, kind of late in 2015, I met with Commissioner Bettman and Deputy Commissioner Daly, and basically said, we'll bring you on and you can figure it out. Similar to a number of guys that have come on board here, not the least of which is President Brendan Shanahan, president of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So obviously was very fortunate, but thrilled to get that offer and was able to kind of get exposed to a ton of different things at the league. Was involved in the China efforts and kind of growing hockey in that country for probably a year and a half. And have been able to really get a great view on kind of both the business and the hockey side. And this to have really come to actually refine a role, actually working with our elite developmental league. So from the AHL and the ECHL through college hockey, through juniors, that's really where I'm focused now, and kind of collaborating with them just to improve, again, across the board, kind of the hockey side, going back to player safety, making sure that we're sharing resources, continued conversations there to see how we can improve player development, personal development, and keep the players as safe as possible through kind of traditional business lines, through kind of social and growth programs, aligning on, for example, like a Hockey Fights Cancer, but learn to play programs, getting people exposed to our game with those leagues, and then through more traditional business lines, marketing and that. So it really has been, I can't thank, I guess both Deputy Commissioner Daly and Gary enough for kind of trusting me and seeing something in me that I might not have seen that allows me to keep contributing to this game, and I'm pretty happy to do so.
Awesome. And when the Blues won the Cup a couple of days ago, you tweeted out, so many incredible people and stories, too many to list, but what a night. This city should be proud, and Steve Ott deserves it. What are some of the stories that you didn't want to list? And if you could say it on the record. I mean, I don't know if some of those are off limits for the microphone.
No.
But and then you also specifically singled out Steve Ott. You were on the same teams in the NHL, and yet you felt like you should mention him and congratulate him in particular. Is there a story behind that too?
Yeah. So actually, I guess addressing the first one. I mean, the stories, like, we couldn't have written. You couldn't write a fiction. People wouldn't believe kind of where the Blues came from, and I know some, like the folks there, from Doug Armstrong to on the hockey side to Chris Zimmerman and Chappie on the business side. So, like, it's such a fantastic organization in a great city. And to see it, they were, last in points, January 3rd, and for them to come roaring back, obviously the rise of Jordan Binnington, has been incredible to watch. Ryan O'Reilly getting his chance on the big stage. I think people have come to really see how both great a player and person, from Layla coming to the games, and then, going to the Mummers Club there and the initiation of Gloria as the team's win song. Like it was just so many fairy tale pieces of that puzzle that came together for a championship, and to see them win first cup in St. Louis Blues history. It's just great for St. Louis. I think great for hockey, great for a really established and respected franchise. And Tom Stillman, the owner, has been a fantastic owner. So it's just been just a great run. For capping off a fantastic playoffs with upsets and unpredictability and fast, great hockey. And I dare say to see two heavy physical teams who can also do the fast skill stuff meet in the finals was something special too. And inevitably, I'm intrigued how GMs will react to the most recent Cup champion, as that seems to be sometimes the MO of building championship caliber hockey teams, a little bit of copycatting. So I'm intrigued to see what will come down the pipe. But so Otter, my brother and Steve Ott were the same age. He's 2 years older than me, and they actually played together growing up. And I actually played on a couple of the prospects team with Steve, coached by his dad, Butch Ott. And so essentially we're just old family friends, and we used to train together in the summers. And it was for him to be assistant coach. I just shake my head. He's an absolute beauty. And just like a hilarious guy who will cut you down to pieces, cut you to ribbons, but you'll be laughing when he does it. And to see him, I think I remember, he came to my Stanley Cup celebration in Amherstburg, and but I was kind of a jerk about it. I think I ended up grabbing the cup, and Darryl Powell was another NHL player that I played with at Princeton.
Rangers legend Darryl Powell.
And what's that?
Rangers legend Darryl Powell.
Exactly, and obviously he came just within millimeters with Philly, but was kind of a jerk about it and was kind of chasing them around because obviously with the cup, because obviously the superstition of not touching the cup until you've won it. So I'm pretty thrilled for Otter that he's now able to touch the cup whenever he wants, and it's so cool to see that happen for him and all the other guys.
What a story the Blues are. Not only that, they're also a class-act organization. From what I understand on social media, they flew their entire team to Boston to watch Game 7. They also, of course, as we all saw, brought Layla onto the ice to celebrate with them. They also called up Chris Thorburn so that the insurance could cover his autistic son's medical expenses. I mean, those few gestures were absolutely incredible, and that is such a class-act organization. What did you think of this year's final and the playoffs as a whole?
I thought it was great. I think the series was fantastic between Boston and St. Louis, and the playoffs as a whole were just fantastic. I think it all bore itself out, and just the interest and just seeing some of the ratings that it got, and the markets where people didn't have a team in it was just awesome to see. And nothing against the Blues. The Blues. Nothing against the Bruins. I actually grew up a Bruins fan because of Cam Neely. Loved everything about his game. And obviously now he's the president with the Bruins. So it's, I always like seeing them in the mix. But I dare say I, like a lot of folks, were like, Boston's got a lot of championships right now. I wouldn't mind seeing the Blues win one. So a lot of people tuning in to see that, and just the excitement in St. Louis. It was pretty thrilling. Cam Neely I grew up just outside of Windsor, Ontario, across from Detroit. So my parents were Red Wings fans. My brother was a Maple Leafs fan, so obviously I couldn't be any of those things. So I actually fell in love with the Bruins and Cam Neely, and wanted to pattern my game after his. And I think I got one of the elements of his game. Unfortunately, missed out on a few. Was hopefully almost as tough as him, but I'm not sure the goal scoring touch was quite there.
You still have a ring though. So at the end of the day, you're still a Stanley Cup champion. So I know you have to run. I have one more question for you. As a former player, when you watch hockey games, either live or on TV or whatever else, is there something that you like to watch specifically that maybe fans or most fans don't see or maybe don't appreciate as much as they should? Is there a particular element of the game that you think should be highlighted more?
Yeah, I actually, yeah, for certainly from maybe a more casual fan standpoint, I think the pay, one of the things that I remember hearing, actually, I think Don Fear shared this with me. There was a survey that when a player deflects a puck, there was I want to say 70-ish%, a very high number of kind of casual fans that thought that was like accidental, and just appreciating the hand-eye coordination of some of these guys that we saw it. I think maybe the most salient moment was in Game 6 with Charlie McAvoy whacked that puck that was probably about to go in and really give the Blues a boost out of the air on the goal line, into Rask, and that one is just a testament to the practice, the work that guys put into to this, and I think I'd love to see that appreciated more. It was something I used to practice all the time. Got to do it a little bit on the PP and in the minors and in college, obviously. Stand my big frame in front of I was always good at getting in the way. That was probably one of my biggest assets. I could stand in the way. But working on deflecting the puck into the net. It generally doesn't, I think our broadcaster's done a much better job, or just a great job of kind of unveiling that, but it is something that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I think just being there live is the most important thing. If you can get at least a few minutes close, just to see the size, skill, and speed of these guys these days, it's something to behold. What these guys do on their skates on ice at over 20 miles an hour, and the difference at the NHL level with kind of just how crisp everything is. As I said, working with some of our developmental leagues, like it's like almost everything is there, but it's all an inch or two off, which ends up making mistakes, which ends up creating chances. And I think that sometimes just how good these guys are is tough to fathom.
Kevin, I truly, truly, truly appreciate the time that you've given me to come on the 1-year anniversary show. I can't thank you enough. It means so much to me that you're willing to devote some of your time. If there's anything you want to plug, if you got social media, if you have an event that you want people to know about, if there's anything that you want to mention, the floor is yours.
I think I'm at kwesty.com, at kwesty19 still on my Twitter, but it's not the most engaging one, but I like throwing out a few things. And actually, one thing I contributed to a book called 23 to Win, compiled by Jason Ferris, who was last with the Dallas Stars, the COO of the Dallas Stars. He's written and kind of edited, compiled some of the more impressive books. One called Behind the Moves, which was kind of anecdotes and interviews with GMs over the years to talk about what it actually is like. Highly recommend anybody who's interested on that side of the business to check it out. And then this new one coming up, It Takes 23, talks about kind of all the little pieces and the role players, and how to build a championship team. So it's a really cool concept, and was thrilled to kind of be able to contribute. It was I'm dealing with kind of the sanctuaries where it's just the guys basically on the road, in the room, and at the bench. So it was something that was pretty cool to be a part of, and look forward to it coming out in a couple months. But you can pre-order it now, something like that. It Takes 23 on Twitter, but check it out if you're interested. And basically, he's interviewed 23 Stanley Cup winners to give their take on how they would build a championship team. So I'm really excited to see more of the book.
That's awesome. I'm going to link everything in the description of this episode. And if you're interested, just click the link and it'll take you to those books. Again, Kevin, I mean, I can't even put into words how much I appreciate the fact that you took some time out of your day to come on the 1-year anniversary special of the show. I truly appreciate it. And next time you have some time, I mean, we work we work a block away from each other. We're very close. So if there's ever if you ever have some time, I work some weird hours, especially, well, maybe not now with with the finals out of the way. But if you ever have some time, let me know. I know you got you bought lunch for me 2 years ago, and now I got your back whenever you have some time. So just let me know, and I'll make that happen.
Well, it's my pleasure, and congrats on the 1 year anniversary. Do some great work. So continue, good luck, and congratulations on one great year.
Thank you, Kevin. That means a lot to me. And this has been episode number 52 of Chel Squared, of course, the 1 year episode with Stanley Cup champion Kevin Westgarth. Episode number 53 coming out next week. I'll talk to you then.